Imagine being an 11-year-old girl, living the drama of having to choose between the approval of your friends and your own values. Does it seem like a simple decision? But what if that choice involved theft? That's right, peer pressure can be devastating. And in this case, a young woman was forced to decide between fitting in or doing what she knew was right. The story you are about to see is not just an ordinary story. It reveals the real consequences of giving in to the group, of how a seemingly harmless afternoon can turn into a life or death situation for your integrity. Have you ever found yourself in a position where you had to choose between your friends and what you believe in? Maybe you've already felt this pressure. What would you do if you were forced to steal to be accepted? And most importantly, how would it shape your life? Let's find out. If you've ever felt this pressure, or if you want to learn how to better deal with difficult choices, this is the right place for you. Subscribe to the channel now and join us as we explore real stories and valuable lessons that can change the way you approach life. Don't miss the chance to be part of this journey of self-discovery and overcoming. It was another ordinary day in the life of Taylor, an 11-year-old girl who seemed to be looking for something bigger. At school, she always tried to be exemplary, but like every child, she felt that need to belong, to be part of something bigger. And it was in this scenario that it all began. Taylor never imagined that innocent invitation to have lunch with new colleagues could turn into a moment of overcoming and deep drama. At first, the proposal seemed innocent, perhaps even inspiring. After all, who doesn't want to feel included? But the turnaround was not long in coming. What she didn't know was that these girls were about to test not only her morals, but also her humility and selflessness. In the school cafeteria, the sound of laughter and lively conversations echoed. Taylor, sitting with her new friends, felt like she was the center of attention. The feeling of finally being noticed was invigorating, but at the same time, there was something uncomfortable in the air. The girls talked about plans for after school, and Taylor, eager to be part of this new group, readily accepted the invitation. It was a simple trip to the mall, right? Nothing wrong with that, she thought. But little did Taylor know that this was just the beginning of an internal conflict that would make her question everything she believed. As the afternoon unfolded, things began to change. The girls seemed friendly at first, but little by little, subtle pressures started to appear. The shopping plan had an unexpected twist. Taylor's new friends weren't there to buy, but rather to steal. And more than that, they wanted Taylor to be complicit in their actions. At that moment, the young girl's mind was spinning in a mixture of shock and fear. How could she deny it? Would it be deleted again? These questions echoed in his head, creating a real personal drama. Taylor had always prided herself on her morality, but now she was backed into a corner. The girls put her in a difficult position. She could simply refuse, but the fear of losing her newfound friendship paralyzed her. This is where the real drama of the story comes in. At times like these, it's easy to underestimate the power of peer pressure, especially for someone so young. The twist, however, was not that Taylor felt pressured, but in what would come next, her ability to overcome. She knew deep down that she needed to make a decision. The hours seemed to drag by as Taylor fought her own thoughts. Heart racing, breathing heavy. It was as if she was torn between two versions of herself. The girl who always did what was right, and the young girl who just wanted to be accepted. At that moment, altruism began to kick in, an inner voice that reminded her that she was not only protecting herself, but also doing what was right for others. This was a battle between morality and the desire to fit in, a battle that many of us have faced in one way or another. As time passed, the tension increased. Taylor knew that if he didn't make a decision soon, it might be too late. She watched her colleagues closely, noting the casual disregard with which they spoke about the consequences of their actions. For them, it was just a game. For Taylor, it was much more than that. Her mind raced with images of what might happen if she was caught. The fear of disappointing her parents, the shame of being exposed as a thief, all of this invaded her. But above all, what weighed most heavily was her conscience, that part of her that knew, clearly, what was right. Finally, after much internal struggle, Taylor made his decision. She wouldn't be part of that. Even if the price was social exclusion, she would not allow her morality to be compromised. It was in this moment of overcoming that Taylor realized something fundamental. True friendship cannot be built on pressure and fear. The drama in which she had been inserted actually served to strengthen her integrity. A powerful lesson, not just for her, but for anyone who has ever felt the pressure to fit in. This was just the beginning of his journey. The story was far from over, and with that, Taylor could barely imagine what would come next. But something in her heart told her that that decision, as difficult as it was the first of many that would put her on the right path. Little by little, the drama gave way to an inner calm, a kind of newfound confidence. Deep down, she knew that this experience would shape her in ways she had yet to discover. And so, the stage was set for what came next. Peer pressure can be powerful, but Taylor's inner strength was even greater. She was now preparing, silently, to face what lay ahead. One thing was certain. This was just the beginning of a story that involved not only personal overcoming, but also inspiration for those around him. A true journey of self-discovery and humility. The classroom was almost empty when the teacher approached Taylor, with that encouraging smile that only good educators have. She always knew that Taylor was a good student, dedicated, and with a rare humility for her age. But something was different. Taylor seemed a little distant, quieter than usual. The teacher didn't need to be an expert to notice that something was out of place. And with the patience that only the most experienced have, she began a casual conversation, almost as if she were a friend. "Taylor, have you ever thought about trying to connect more with your peers?" she suggested softly, knowing that the girl was facing an internal battle. The drama of school life was just beginning. Taylor, still absorbing the pressure of her new friendships, tried to understand why. Even though she was doing what she thought was right, she felt out of place. The teacher, with her calm speech, planted the idea that the solution was not in moving away, but in opening one's heart to new possibilities. What Taylor didn't yet know was that this simple suggestion from the teacher would be the beginning of a new turning point in her life. After all, how could you connect with others if your own identity seemed to be at stake? Inspiration was beginning to germinate there, but there was still a lot to be discovered. As the teacher spoke, Taylor felt a mix of comfort and doubt. Should she really get closer to her colleagues? Would this solve your feeling of loneliness? The teacher seemed to believe so, and at that moment, Taylor wanted to believe it too. After all, who doesn't want to be accepted, to be part of something bigger? The truth is that overcoming our biggest challenges often starts with small steps. The teacher, without knowing it, was seeding in Taylor the desire to find her own strength, her own way of belonging. But the journey would not be simple. The teacher continued to encourage Taylor, speaking lightly but powerfully. "You know, Taylor, people like you for who you are. Sometimes all we need to do is give others a chance." This phrase kept echoing in the girl's mind. She knew deep down that the teacher was right. But how to do this without losing its essence? How to open up to others without sacrificing your values? What Taylor didn't yet understand was that true strength comes from the ability to be true to yourself, while at the same time connecting with others in a genuine way. Taylor's humility was her greatest strength, even if she didn't know it yet. In the days that followed, Taylor reflected on the teacher's words. Maybe it was time to try something different, to take the risk of being more sociable, even if it meant facing the fear of being rejected. But at the same time, she knew she couldn't force herself to change completely. Her humble and introverted nature was part of who she was. The teacher, with her wisdom, was not telling Taylor to transform herself, but to allow herself to grow, to be inspired by the small interactions she could have with her classmates. And so, a new dilemma arose. How to balance the desire to fit in with the need to remain true to oneself. With each conversation with her teacher, Taylor felt a small spark of inspiration grow within her. It was as if, little by little, the idea of opening up to new friendships didn't seem so scary. The teacher, in her gentle way, knew that true power lay in planting the seed of trust, letting the rest blossom naturally. The teacher's selflessness was palpable. She was not just there to teach school subjects, but to guide students on their personal journeys. And Taylor, although he didn't know it, was about to experience a major upheaval in his social life. Over time, Taylor began to get closer to his colleagues, albeit cautiously. But, as predicted, the feeling of discomfort remained. The pressure to fit in felt greater than ever. The teacher, always close by, continued to offer words of encouragement, reminding Taylor that true overcoming comes from within. The words sounded like music, but Taylor's heart was still divided. She wanted to open up, but not at the expense of her values. It was a common dilemma for many, and perhaps that's the biggest lesson Taylor was learning. It was then that, one afternoon, during another conversation with the teacher, Taylor realized something fundamental. It wasn't just about making friends. It was about finding your place in the world. The inspiration for this would not come from outside, but from within. And it was at that moment that the turnaround began to take shape. Maybe, in trying to be part of something bigger, she was forgetting who she really was. The teacher, with her humility and wisdom, had known this for a long time, but she expected Taylor to come to this conclusion on her own. And so it was. The teacher's support was an anchor for Taylor. With each new day, his words resonated stronger. It wasn't about changing who she was, but about having the courage to be who she already knew she needed to be. The drama of social pressure was still present, but now Taylor was beginning to see the full picture. Overcoming, after all, was not something that came from outside. It was an inner strength, and the teacher was just there to remind Taylor of her own ability to inspire and lift herself up. And so, with the support of his teacher, Taylor began to follow a new path. A path where she would learn that true friendship didn't need masks. The humility that always characterized her would become her greatest strength. And without even realizing it, Taylor was preparing to face even greater challenges. The teacher knew this, and was silently proud of the student she was helping to shape. But this, of course, was just the beginning of something much bigger. The mood seemed lighter earlier that afternoon, when Taylor received the invitation that would change everything. "Shall we go for a walk in the mall after class?" asked her new classmates, with that carefree air that only teenagers can have. For Taylor, it was a mix of excitement and fear. She was finally being included, and who doesn't like to feel part of something? But at the same time, a hint of doubt formed in his chest. She didn't know exactly why, but something about that invitation made her uncomfortable. Even so, she accepted without hesitation, ready to live an experience she would never forget. It was as if I was about to enter a movie set, but I still didn't know what the ending would be. The hours passed, and when the school bell rang, there was Taylor, eagerly waiting for her new friends in front of the gate. The mall was the next destination. They arrived excited, laughing and talking about their weekend plans. Taylor, on the other hand, watched silently, taking in every detail. The idea of being part of something like this filled her with a mixture of pride and fear. After all, was she really ready to deal with the pressure of being a popular girl? Doubt lingered, but at that moment the drama was just beginning. When they entered the mall, everything seemed normal. The windows full of clothes, the smell of popcorn in the air, and the laughter of the people around. Taylor, still a little out of place, followed her friends from store to store, listening to their comments about what was cool and what wasn't. She tried to fit in, to be part of the conversation, but there was something strange. Her friends didn't seem very interested in buying. On the contrary, they looked at the pieces of clothing with a different look, as if they were plotting something. Taylor began to realize that perhaps this outing wasn't as innocent as it seemed. The mood changed from lightness to something darker, and fear began to set in. That's when, suddenly, one of the girls suggested, "Let's take this and leave. No one will notice." Taylor froze. To steal? That had never crossed his mind. His first reaction was to laugh, thinking it was a joke. But upon noticing her friend's serious looks, the laughter died in her throat. She didn't want to believe what was happening. The pressure he felt increased by the second, and the drama intensified. Would she have the courage to do something so wrong, just to maintain her new friendship? The idea seemed absurd, but at that moment, she couldn't think clearly. The friends insisted, saying that no one would get hurt, that it was just a little prank. Taylor knew it wasn't right, but how could she say no? The fear of being excluded again, of losing what little she had achieved, paralyzed her. She was faced with a difficult choice: follow her principles or give in to pressure from her friends. And like in any good drama story, time was running out. The tension in the air was palpable, and the young woman felt as if she were at a crossroads. As they walked through the store, The girls began putting small items of clothing into their bags. Taylor, still in shock, watched them without knowing what to do. His hands were shaking. His heart was beating fast. The scene unfolded before her eyes, and she saw herself as a spectator in her own life. How could I get out of this situation without committing myself? The answer seemed distant, and the fear only grew. The drama was at an all-time high, and Taylor knew her decision would change everything. As her friends finished shopping, Taylor felt her conscience screaming. Every fiber of her being said this was wrong, but at the same time, the fear of being seen as goody-two-shoes held her back. She knew that if she said something, she might lose her friends, but if she didn't say so, she would be betraying herself. The moral dilemma he found himself in was like a knot that was getting tighter and tighter. And as if that wasn't enough, the girls started to pressure her directly. "Aren't you going to catch anything?" they asked with a smile that hid the true intention behind it. Taylor then felt that the weight of the decision was completely on his shoulders. It was now or never. She could follow her friend's example and leave the store with a bag full of stolen items, or she could be true to who she really was. The internal drama reached its peak. Every second felt like an eternity, and the pressure felt overwhelming. What would she do? Give in or resist? What if she just picked something small, just so she wouldn't be left out? After all, who would know? No one would notice, right? But deep down, Taylor knew the answer. She knew that no matter what the girls thought, she couldn't betray her own values. The fear of being rejected was still there, but the feeling of doing something wrong was even greater. She needed to make a decision, and she knew that decision would define who she really was. The clock was ticking, and the choice she would make at that moment would echo for a long time in her life. Suspense was in the air, and the only thing certain was that, one way or another, that afternoon at the mall would change everything for Taylor. At that moment, as the girls laughed and joked about their purchases, Taylor was immersed in an internal battle. Their laughter seemed distant, as if a veil of tension separated her from the reality around her. All she could hear was the voice of her own conscience, echoing in her mind like a constant alarm. This was a situation where right and wrong were clearly defined, but the fear of rejection clouded his thoughts. "What do I do?" was the question that was going through his head. She knew what was right, but the pressure from her friends felt overwhelming. The drama was building inside her, and the tension was palpable. The moral dilemma Taylor faced was not simple. On the one hand, there was the desire to fit in, to finally have friends who accepted her. On the other, her conscience screamed, reminding her of the teachings she had received, of the values that her parents and teachers passed on to her. The image of his mother, always so honest, flashed in his mind. How would she feel if she knew her daughter was about to steal? The responsibility weighed heavily on Taylor's shoulders, and with every second that passed, the decision seemed more difficult. She wanted to be accepted, but not at the expense of her own integrity. Taylor's mind was like a battlefield, with her conscience on one side and fear of exclusion on the other. Her friends' words, encouraging her to pick up something, echoed in her ears, but they couldn't drown out the inner voice that said, "This isn't right." The drama continued to unfold, and the pressure was at an all-time high. The feeling of being trapped was suffocating. She thought of 1,000 ways to get out of that situation, but none of them seemed easy. How could I face those girls and say that I didn't agree with what they were doing, without being dismissed as the right one? As Taylor looked at the items scattered around the store, a quote from her teacher came to mind. "When your conscience speaks, listen." Those simple words, spoken so softly during an ordinary class, now seemed like a scream in his mind. It was as if the teacher was there, by her side, reminding her that true power was in doing what was right, even when it seemed impossible. And there, in the middle of the store, as her friends continued their robbery plan, Taylor felt a spark of strength grow inside her. The inspiration she needed was there all along, hidden beneath the fear. But now, his conscience was beginning to win the battle. What made everything even more complicated was the fact that Taylor knew that by saying no, she would be putting their new friendship at risk. For an 11-year-old girl, this seemed like the end of the world, and that was exactly the emotional upheaval she was experiencing. Overcoming, however, was recognizing that no friendship is worth the loss of your own dignity. The humility that had always characterized Taylor, the girl who followed the rules and respected others, was about to become her greatest strength. But to do that, she needed to find the courage to say what her heart already knew. In the midst of that internal confusion, Taylor realized she was not alone. Even without realizing it, her conscience was like a faithful friend, always present, always willing to guide her along the right path. Altruism also emerged at that moment. By choosing not to steal, she was not only protecting herself, but also teaching, even if indirectly, to her friends that the wrong way is never the way. She knew that it might be too late to change their attitude, but at least she could come out of that situation with her head held high, knowing that she hadn't let herself get carried away by the pressure. The decision was then made. Taylor took a deep breath, looked at her friends and said, in a firm but calm voice, "I'm not going to do that." The girls, surprised, stopped for a second. The drama of the moment increased, as if time was slowing down. Taylor felt her heart race, but her conscience was calmer than ever. She knew it was the right decision, and even though the consequences were losing her new friends, she was at peace with her choice. Sometimes the greatest courage is in saying no, and Taylor had just discovered that. The reaction of her friends was immediate. They laughed. They mocked. They called Taylor Goody Two-Shoes. The pain of rejection was real, but the feeling of doing what was right outweighed any discomfort. Taylor knew that by following his conscience, he was winning a greater victory than any social acceptance could offer. Deep down, she knew that true friendships weren't based on doing wrong things together, but on mutual support and respect. And although it wasn't easy, she chose to walk the most difficult path, that of integrity. Thus, Taylor left the mall without having given in to the pressure, but with a strange feeling of relief and sadness. The drama was not over yet, but the internal battle was at least resolved. Her conscience, her true guide, had won, and now she prepared to face the external consequences of her decision. But deep down, Taylor knew she had made the right choice, and that, in itself, was already a victory. The clock seemed to tick slower when Taylor finally walked away from her friends. They, laughing and completely ignoring the young woman's warning, continued with their plan. Taylor, on the other hand, knew something was about to happen. That feeling in the air, that foreboding, was almost tangible. She looked back, seeing the girls slide their clothes into their backpacks and purses without any concern. They have no idea what they are about to face, he thought, his heart still racing. The tension was rising, and the drama was intensifying like a movie about to reach its climax. The consequences were coming, and Taylor felt it. Minutes later, as the girls were leaving the store, a familiar sound broke the false sense of tranquility. The alarm. Suddenly, the laughter turned to panic, and the girls' confident looks gave way to pure fear. Mall security was quick, and in a matter of seconds, the girls were surrounded. Taylor watched the scene from a distance, her heart divided between relief at not being involved and sadness at seeing her friends in trouble. They tried to disguise it, act as if they didn't know anything, but the evidence was right there, inside the bags. The drama had turned into a cruel reality. The girls were taken to a small room at the back of the store where they were to be questioned. Taylor, still sitting outside, couldn't stop thinking about what could have happened if she had given in to the pressure. Now, she was not there as an accomplice, but as someone who, despite everything, tried to warn them. It was a mix of relief and sadness. Her friends were about to face the legal consequences of their actions, and Taylor knew their fates were out of her control. The drama now became real, and the weight of responsibility was on those who decided to follow the wrong path. While mall security was talking to the girls, Taylor heard someone mention security cameras. They had been filmed from the moment they entered the store. There was no escape. The girls, still in shock, tried to justify their actions, but it was too late. Taylor, upon hearing the mention of the cameras, felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that, even though she hadn't stolen anything, she had been seen with them, and that in itself could complicate your situation. The drama took on a new dimension, and now Taylor found herself involved, even without wanting to, in a web of problems. The police arrived quickly. Blue and red lights flashed outside the mall as people looked curiously at what was happening. Taylor, watching from a distance, felt a tightness in his chest. This wasn't what she wanted for her friends, but she knew they were reaping what they sowed. The feeling of helplessness consumed her as she watched the girls being taken to the police car. What was supposed to be a fun afternoon had turned into a nightmare. The twist in the drama was inevitable, and Taylor knew their lives would never be the same after that moment. As the girls were loaded into the police car, one of them looked at Taylor with tears in her eyes. It was a look that mixed regret, fear, and perhaps even a silent plea for help. Taylor felt the weight of that look, but knew there was nothing more she could do. She had tried to warn them. Now the drama was out of his hands. All that remained was the harsh reality of the consequences, and Taylor knew that despite everything, she had made the right choice in following her conscience. But that didn't make the situation any less painful. Back home, Taylor reflected on what had happened. The day's drama had left deep marks. She thought about what her friends' lives would be like from that moment on. They would face legal action, would have to deal with the shame of their actions, and would likely face severe punishment. But Taylor also knew that, deep down, this could be the turning point for them. Sometimes the hardest lessons teach us the most, and she hoped her friends learned something from it all. The weight of the consequences hung in the air. Taylor knew that as much as she wanted to help, this was a journey her friends would need to travel alone. What started as an afternoon of fun had turned into real drama, and the girls would now face the repercussions of their choices. Taylor, on the other hand, felt relieved that she had stood her ground. Her decision not to give in to peer pressure had saved not only her reputation, but also her peace of mind. And in a way, this also inspired her to move forward with even more confidence. As the police lights faded in the distance, Taylor knew this would be a moment she would never forget. Overcoming that day was not only in having resisted the pressure, but also in having learned the true value of integrity. The drama wasn't over yet, but Taylor now knew she was on the right track, and deep down, she hoped that her friends could one day find the same path. At the end of this whole story, Taylor realized that true power was not in being accepted by a group, but in staying true to who she was. The message of integrity stuck in her mind, like a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. As he walked home that day, his heart felt lighter despite all the confusion that had occurred. She had faced a moral dilemma, and in the end, she chose the right path. The courage this required of her was greater than any act of rebellion could have offered. The drama of the day turned into a lesson in overcoming and inspiration. Taylor knew that doing what's right isn't always easy, but she also learned that it's in those moments that we discover our true strength. She had stood her ground, even when everything around her seemed to be falling apart. Taylor's altruism also stood out, as by refusing to participate in the robbery, she was not only protecting herself, but also setting an example for her friends, even if they didn't realize it at the time. Integrity is not just about what we do when others are watching, but about the choices we make when no one else seems to care. The impact of that afternoon at the mall wasn't limited to the legal consequences for Taylor's friends. He also brought deep reflection on the choices we make and how they shape who we are. Taylor, by following her conscience, learned that true strength is not in following the crowd, but in having the courage to walk a different path when necessary. This made her realize that the humility with which she had lived until then was, in fact, her greatest weapon. The drama experienced that day would only be a memory, but the lesson of integrity would be something she would carry with her forever. Her teacher's words echoed in Taylor's mind, bringing new meaning. "Listen to your conscience," said the soft voice in his head. Now she understood how powerful this lesson really was. The inspiration she felt when making her decision did not come from the desire to be recognized or applauded, but from the simple certainty that she had done what was right. This was the essence of integrity. Doing what is right even when it is difficult, even when it means swimming against the current. The drama of that day was overcome, but the emotional scars would serve as a constant reminder that, in the end, the truth always prevails. Later, as Taylor talked to her teacher about what had happened, she realized that saying no to social pressure had strengthened not only her self-esteem, but also her character. The teacher, with a proud smile, reassured the young woman. "You did what many are afraid to do. You maintained your integrity." These words, although simple, were profound. The drama of the situation had passed, but the message of integrity was still alive within Taylor. She knew that in a world where so many are driven by the desire to belong, being true to herself was the greatest act of courage. Integrity is something that often goes unnoticed until we are tested. Taylor had been tested, and her decision showed how strong she truly was. The pressure from her friends might have been overwhelming, but her conscience was stronger. Taylor's selflessness in staying true to his values showed that, even in times of pressure, it is possible to act with kindness and respect. She had shown that it was possible to overcome any situation, as long as you trust your own principles. And that, in the end, was the greatest lesson she could learn. As time passed and the girls faced the consequences of their actions, Taylor continued to follow her path, knowing that her decision was the right one. The message of integrity was clear. When we are true to ourselves, it doesn't matter what others think. The drama Taylor experienced in that shopping mall was a reflection of what many people face on a daily basis: the dilemma between doing what is right and giving in to pressure from others. But Taylor proved that it's possible to choose the harder path and still come out stronger on the other side. This experience changed Taylor forever, not just because her friend stood up to the law, but because she learned the value of honesty and moral courage. Often, the simplest situations in life, like an invitation to go shopping, can turn into great lessons. And that's what happened to Taylor. The drama that seemed insignificant turned into an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to prove to herself that, regardless of the circumstances, maintaining integrity is what really matters. And so, Taylor moved forward more confident, stronger, and more aware of the value of her choices. What started as a simple day at school turned into a journey of self-discovery where she learned the true meaning of being true to who she is. And although the path of integrity isn't always the easiest, Taylor knew she had made the right choice. The message was clear. Being honest with yourself is the greatest act of overcoming anyone can perform. And with that, she was ready to face any other drama that life could bring. Now that you've seen the power of maintaining your integrity, the question is, what would you do in a situation like this? Is giving in to pressure worth it, when it could cost you who you really are? Life is full of moments when we are tested, and the choices we make in those times define our character. Think about times when you felt like you were being pulled into something wrong. What can you do differently? Maybe it's time to change the way you react to pressure from others and start being guided by your values. It's not easy, but that's exactly what will make a difference in your life. If you want to continue learning more about how to face these dilemmas and make the right decisions, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. After all, knowledge is power, and this next video could be what you need to transform your life.